Before AI, before big tech, this conversation started in the intelligence world, where truth, power, and narrative collide. In this episode, we dig into how misinformation evolves, why the liar's dividend is reshaping trust, and where free speech meets real-world harm. This is about security, credibility, and what happens when reality itself becomes contested. Hi, and welcome back to another episode of the Life in Bomb City podcast. My name is Aaron Favor. Beth will not be with me today. She's out doing other things, but I've got this wonderful special guest, Erica Shoemate, who is an author, a tech policy leader, maternal health strategist, and advocate. She has extensive knowledge in cutting edge technologies like generative AI and ad tech, and we're so happy to have you here.
Thank you so much, Aaron, for having me. I'm just really excited and honored to, one, be speaking with you today, and also to get a bit more time with your audience and hope that they take away some really good key points into their everyday lives. So thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. So tell us a little bit about your background. What led you here?
Oh, man. So a little bit about me is, before I ever stepped into like this world of like big tech or AI, my world was all national security and intelligence. And I worked on programs that touch a gamut of things from counterterrorism, counterintelligence, transnational organized crime, foreign fighters, and relates to the CT subset, and like also dual use technology as well. And also have had the gift and the honor and young, honestly, very sobering working national kidnappings, crimes against children as well. And being that my work has spanned cases involving ISIS recruitment networks and threat tied to trafficking and organized criminal groups and so much more that I will probably never be able to speak about. It taught me something very profound, that people don't just wake up one day and want to do something harmful or want to do something that people will call, radicalized. There are truly these psychological, social, and environmental forces that shaping these behaviors of people. And I learned to see threats, honestly, not headlines, but the human stories, like the storytelling piece, people on the brink, exploited vulnerabilities, and systems either preventing harm or enabling it. And so how I got here today is really because of your beautiful podcast and audience. Those things really are at the, I would say, the North Star of what your podcast is about. And I think that your audience could benefit from some of my knowledge and expertise. So happy to be here.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, well, then that's great. No. All of those things are absolutely fascinating to me. In fact, I a second ago I'd pulled up an article by a guy named Robert Chesney. Do you know who he is? He's down there at the University of Texas Austin Law School. I think he's the dean down there.
Yeah.
And he wrote an article a couple of years ago in 2018 about deepfakes specifically, and I think that he and his co-author had mentioned some of the I guess what did he call the liar's dilemma, or not the liar's dilemma, the liar's dividend is what he called it, in which people have skepticism towards the truth. And that ends up playing into the hands of people who are not telling the truth, who will then use the truth to, subjugate or whatever you want to call it.
Right?
Yeah. The actual truth, which is just crazy to me. But I mean, that's the world we live in. Do you want to talk about that for a second?
Yeah, like I think that's a great call out. And to your point, it's actually the thing too that, if I want to be honest, that's what keeps me up at night, is really to watch this shift in our society of being okay with having things that are not true. And yet that is the continued norm now, and not to push back on those things. And also having, if you have a $2 microphone and you have your good ring light and you have all the followers, then that automatically equates to you being an expert. And we know just because of our worlds that that is not the same. Just because you can be loud, or as I say, I can be loud and wrong, or just loud and belligerent, does not make your opinion factual. And when you talk about what the article is speaking to, the misinformation, and people living in this world of misinformation, and really it's becoming normalized. I I am the person that has always pushed back and wanted to push back, because we were taught at a very early age about, character, integrity, and being someone who is, what you see is what you get, right? And we tell our kids this so early on. We tell the youth this so early on, but yet our society as a whole is doing something completely different. And we have not done the reckoning around that. And what I think about these things, one, I think it's absolutely ridiculous. I think it's wrong. Two, this whole idea of, also, well, it's freedom of speech. And I was like, no, I came up in a world, like being part of the intelligence community, where there was a line of free speech and also harm. And somewhere we have skewed more towards being okay with people being harmed by words than the actual protection of the people. And if we do not get back to that as a society, and these things, America is like, part of like the trend and leading, unfortunately, in many ways. But I do see that the world is distancing us in a way, because they know that the truth is what keeps people safe. And the misinformation and disinformation is the thing that actually becomes the weaponization, the thing that gets people killed. Unfortunately, these are matters of life or death. And so I'll just wrap it up to say that what I think about it is, we as a society, if we can't get it from the people in public offices, then we, the people, must be willing to put our differences aside and say, no, the North Star is always the truth. Whether we like it or not, whether I always agree with my neighbor or not, it is still the truth.
Yes, ma'am. No, that's second. Here, here. If we were at the constitutional convention, I'd be like, banging the table, going yes, or whatever.
Thank
But
you.
I absolutely think that there's a certain accountability factor there. I teach government, survey level government. It's not like the high, the PhD
Right,
level
right,
political science or anything like that. I teach, freshmen and sophomores here at the community college level. We have a wide number of students from all kinds of backgrounds from all over the world, and I mean, it's a pleasure and an honor. I know that you have the what you said there in the very beginning here. You said that this is really kind of like a people's business, this is about people, regardless of what ends up happening, whether we're talking about people on Mars, or we're talking about them,
right.
in
Oh,
lunar
Venus,
orbit, or
right?
we're talking about them, in another country. We're still talking about people who have basic fundamental needs, and if those needs aren't being met, then things can get out of
Oh,
hand.
real
And
quick.
it's something that I think about too, mainly, but not from the perspective I think that you do. I think it's more of a perspective of, like from a teaching perspective. How do you get? Um, I mean, and I think that at the same time, we're there's a lot of common ground there. And I think if Beth was here, she's so social psychology, so she would be able
Okay.
to like really talk about that perspective of it, in a much more pointed way than I can. But
Fair.
I just want to go ahead and I guess talk about the people, like what is that taught you, being able to be focused on the individual human stories, and how did you get involved in it, and why do you care about it? Have you always cared about it? Is it something that you have uh, grown to do, or is it a gift?
Yeah. I would say honestly, it's a gift. But it's also the gift that I have continued to nurture and not run away from. Um, and that really speaks to what I'll share with your audience is that I am actually a first generation college graduate from inner city Memphis. So I can really think about the world from a completely different perspective than most of the people that I have done any of my work with. And I've been usually the only one or two, and I just bring a completely different perspective because I've lived the hard, right? And I've lived in public housing. I've lived in ways where I caught the city bus to go to a better school. My mom put us on a city bus to go to a better school. And so when you want to talk about the everyday lives of people, not only do I understand it from a lived experience, I also understand it when we are looking at crime, we're looking at national security threat issues. There's so much about this idea that Western civilization, I will say, is very much so that can't happen. But the problem with that is that that is actually speaking from a place of privilege to say that that can't happen. But when you grow up, if you want to talk about just even, people in general, depending on how you grow up, that informs how you navigate your life in many ways. Like, yeah, there's some adjustments that can happen, for better or for worse, but those things impact how you navigate who you are, what you want to be, all these things. And so at the very crust of all of that is when people haven't had a lot, they learn to operate from being scrappy. And when it's for good, those things serve well to companies, people, all those things. But when it's coming from a place of desperation in a negative way, then there is nothing, I believe, when a person is desperate that they cannot do. And when people at the core of like just humanity for me and how it is human first, humans. And I think so much of that has been lost in these last, decade or so. And when we have our own lived experience, or let's just say, what I find is there's a lot of society that's very homogenous. They only know the community that they've ever been in. And so the only way that they understand other people that may not look like them, may not have had, the type of upbringing they've had, they only have propaganda. They only have what the world has said this certain type of group is. And so I feel blessed and actually a privilege to remind people I am not the exception, that there are people who look like me that are also educated, love people, have good lives, didn't have a lot, but my parents instilled in me the gift of treating thy neighbor right, right? And from a very early age, I can remember my mom always knew I was different, and like I can sense things. I'm very empathetic. I'm an empathetic leader. It's how I lead. I understand people before they even say anything. And I actually now really tap into that. And for a while, I actually distanced myself from that because working in national security and intelligence and even, the big tech world, feelings, what is that? And and over time, becoming a mother and having a very tumultuous pregnancy and motherhood journey, those things actually shifted how I move in life. And so, at the end of the day, did I learn it? Was I born with it? It was definitely innate, but I've curated it over time.
And that's that's fast. It's absolutely fascinating to me because I feel like there's something you just now said that the way that people experience other people, or specifically the way that they try to understand what other people are, where they're coming from, um, is from, I guess, their own. I mean, if if it's not from a place of personal experience, devotion, and sacrifice, then it you become, what's the word, susceptible to information, I don't know, information deception or deception in
Yeah,
general.
that's it.
Um,
Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
mean, that's what you're talking about, though. It sounds like is when you're not focusing necessarily on the human, but what you want to believe about the human, just more like ego, kind of ego driven,
Yeah.
and less about the truth. And so I guess I follow the evidence. What is the yeah, your analytical background. Um, like and when, by the way, whenever you say like you understand what people are saying before they've said it or anything like that, it was like, man, that's kind of like a Jedi. You're kind of like a Jedi is what I'm trying to say. And that's a pretty that's an amazing gift.
Thank you.
You bet. uh I'm curious to know how you complement it with your like analytical, like it's so you were talking about the NatSec stuff and all
Mhm.
the background and the way that they frame problems, I guess, and particularly that community is built around looking at these steps, this analytical process.
Yes, the whole
And
tradecraft piece,
how did
right?
how did that how did that how did those play together?
Yeah, great question. What I say the beauty about me and so many others that look like me that might be in this field or profession is that we have what I would say book smarts, but we also have street smarts. And when you have both, you are literally a unicorn. And one thing about what you mentioned too, like how people, as you kind of like track the breadcrumbs, is people are informed by what they see or what they don't see by how they perceive others, right? And so the one thing that I challenge people on, my colleagues, whoever I'm working with, is there is this stereotype things that like run deep, for various communities, whatever, whether for good, whether for bad, is there are times I've been in rooms where we're working like an operation or whatever, and the stereotype stuff will come up, and I'm like, I am responsible for my people and my communities and also for others because they're not in these rooms, right? And I have a duty as a public servant, as a human, to push back on narratives that can be harmful. Example, you're working transnational organized crime, drug operations, whatever. There is a perception around who that person is or the people are. But what people miss in that is that many people that are like in that world, I don't agree with selling drugs, but what I am saying is those people are still people, and they are a lot of times doing that type of not so great thing to feed their families. Again, desperation. And me understanding that growing up in public housing, I had people that were the people that were, selling and distributing. Of course, I'm like naive eyes at the time, but it was always no, 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 no. If they knew the kids in the community that were like the smart ones, the good ones, they knew they were going to be somebody, you go back in the house, you do this. There's your, again, it was still communal. You never hear when these stories are told about, like, we just took down so and so, you never hear the other side of the human because humans aren't one thing. We all go through life in many ways, and there are times we all operate in the gray. And I think that it is a privilege to sit here and think about like the things that I think about and bringing my analytic trade craft and my everyday life together. And like, do they sometimes have tension with one another? Absolutely. But also, if we go back to the foundation of who I am, I didn't grow up, of course, working in national security, intelligence, or tech policy. I came from these very humble beginnings, a community where people survived by leaning on each other. So we weren't rich in money, but we were rich in community. And therefore, that resilience wasn't a buzzword, it was a way of life. And I'm raised by a mother who worked 2 and 3 jobs to the point she, the saying, work yourself to death. My mom literally worked herself to death, heart stopped. Thank God she's still here. And seeing those things and watching her grit, her resilience, and all these things. She wasn't in boardrooms or briefing rooms, but what she taught me was the values that guide every room that I walk in. Work with integrity, which is number one for your analytic trade craft. You have to be above your own biases. Doesn't mean you're immune to them, but you have to be above them. And you have to go where the information is taking you. Two, take care of people. And as you're working through whatever the thing you're working on, the big operation or just some analytic piece, it's so important that we think about our lived experiences, even in our professional training, because we could be the difference between someone's good day and someone's bad day. And that is how I have been able to really ground myself, stay grounded, and really looking at these very nuanced problems, raw information, disseminated information, and really, again, even if I don't like where the information is taking me, it is my job, again, integrity, to still go after the truth and wherever the information may lead me. And while I'm working to get to whatever the ending is, that I'm also checking my own biases along the way. And I believe because I've stayed grounded, I am able to not have the ego like, no, 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 that's definitely what's going on. Right. To
Mhm.
say, like, nope, that's not what's happened. And having a sense of responsibility and integrity around marrying the two is really the North Star of those things.
Right. No, that's the wonderful answer. I guess one one thing that I've I guess been I think I'm moved by with what you're saying is being from a place like Memphis, for example. And I've never lived in Memphis, but I know Sun
Sure.
Records is there, and I know that I'm for
Yes.
sure, and I know that
Yes.
the juke joints, the old historic juke joints are down there, and all the
Yeah.
blues, all the origin
It's
of the
good
blues. And
music.
good grief,
Yeah.
I have no doubt, and I mean we're gonna have to talk about that some other time because I mean it's a totally separate issue, but it's
Sure.
maybe not. Maybe it's not a separate issue. Maybe it's the same. But I mean, coming from a small community myself, a small background with, I mean, just town of 5,000 people, right? And small,
Wow.
really small community. Very, what's the word? It's everybody knows everything about everybody. Of course, that's the world we live in right now, right? I mean,
Sure.
it's kind of like the
Social
connected
media.
world, the interconnected world of life in general is now kind of expanded. I mean, it's just there's probably a lot of things to be studied on that topic. I'm probably not going to be the person
Agreed.
to do it though, because no. But I will say this. You're talking about the implicit bias, and it's something that I think about a lot. Not because not because I'm thinking like I've got these I've got all of these things that are preventing me from seeing people for who they are. Um,
Hmm.
but because it's like walking into a room and taking it's almost like walking into a room and taking credit for the walls or for the ceiling not falling in. I mean, that has been placed there, and before I walk into a room ever, that's already been constructed. It's already there. And when I walk in and look out the window, I'm looking at it from a perspective that is being framed by
Hmm.
by the room. Whether, I mean, again,
Hmm.
it's important to have the room because obviously it's what provides shelter and it provides
Yeah.
security and organization, and this all these wonderful blessings. But
Yes.
at the same time, they not being aware of how thick the walls are, or whether the window is kind of distorting the color of
Right.
the light outside or whatever. Those are all things that can play into perspective in the same way that they can. And I mean, it's something we talk about all the time. I mean, in my government classes, because it's something we talk about. Um,
Yeah.
I mean, and just to give an example of why it's on my mind, um, we're down here in Texas, in the Texas Panhandle. One thing that has been a topic, and it's probably something that kind of controversial, but it's something that's real life,
Right.
and something the government talks about. It's something that everybody. I mean, people are talking about it, so we need to probably be
Yes.
talking about it. Um,
Right.
we have vulnerable populations, that come in and out of our schools. Um, that are susceptible to all kinds of things, whether it's we were talking about being susceptible to information, deception operations, or whatever the case may be, or these long information campaigns that like a nation state is capable of. But I mean,
Yeah.
what about like rumors, or what about I mean, something that touches on, you know, those communities, as you were mentioning a second ago, transnational criminal organizations and things like that. I mean, there has been a lot of talk about that in the news.
Yeah.
There is a lot of conversation. Just yesterday in one of my classes, you know, we had an election. We had an election going on where we were just trying to basically talk about and illustrate this trinity of things that are going on between money, connections, and time, and that, you know, like that's the messaging has to connect with the audience if you want to continue to
Yes.
get those factors in a campaign. They have to kind of be a revolving door, and so being able to change and adapt when, you know, what you're saying to a group of people is not connecting with them, especially in a democracy, and I
Right.
mean, especially uh, when there's, you know, vulnerable populations around you, is kind of like, it seems like it's a kind of a recklessness or a harm of recklessness that. And I mean, I'm preaching to the choir here. I'm just trying, you know, I'm
Oh, I'm with it
curious.
though.
I'm curious. Um, like when it comes to like those big national issues, and this may be like beyond what we can talk about. Um,
Sure.
but like at the national level, when y'all are discussing really big complex problems like that are going to have
Hmm.
these tremendously massive impacts on so many groups of people, how does that get accounted for exactly? Like, is it something that comes up, like, or is it something that's left up to, you know, local populations or state governments to be concerned with?
Yeah. No, but this is honestly timely. Great call out. And I, one thing I will say to the audience, always remind people that I am always speaking from a place of facts, not feelings, policy, with an added layer of perspective. And the reason why I caveat it in this way is that everything is political, right? I know people are like, oh, try not to get political, but in order for me to actually speak to your question, I actually have to get a little bit more nuance. And what I can say is that um, not being currently in the space, but once you have learned a thing and you've done it, for me, more than 11 years, it really is like muscle memory. And so for me personally, it's hard to turn off because it is the human piece that's being impacted. And I can say, in my experience prior to all the things that's playing out today, there was usually someone in there to check the bias, right? Because again, you could be loud, but you could also be wrong. And that goes for executives too. They're not above being wrong. And it is our job as analysts or, you know, agents or whoever that's involved to call out the thing that could cause harm, could be detrimental. That is our job. That is what we take an oath to, is to protect the Constitution and protect the American people, period. Full stop. Anything outside of those things in the actual law is wrong. And I love the work that I did because we were working to the Constitution, to at the time being in the bureau, like our the biggest the dialogue and all those things we have to learn, and all the different things that really codify what we do in intelligence. And so today, um, I'm drawing this out because it's really important that what I was trained on, what I took an oath to, is literally like the exact opposite of what I'm seeing today. And that has been the most disheartening, infuriating, disgusting thing that I've seen, because we're not just talking about people, humans, because above one, that's the floor, the humans. But then we're talking about kids, right? And how do you work through rumors and things like that? Is that One thing that I learned, honestly, very on in this world, and just really how I grew up in this world, was that from like rumors and implicit bias isn't really about a person being good or bad, because we our lived experiences cause us to have these assumptions, right? And we talked about earlier. So you have these assumptions, and our brains are make decisions sometimes or make these thoughts based on that. But our environment and our culture and all these things put together, our fears as well, don't forget that one, we all have it. But it is it's not the danger of the bias itself or the rumors or whatever you hear. It's being unaware that it is actual bias. And sometimes beyond just bias, it's actually racist. And I'm not, again, trying to go there. I'm just, these are the things, like the way I'm talking to you would be, it was exact the same way I would talk at the table when I'm making analysis, making assessments, and people are saying why they think a thing or why they, think a thing. And their point sometimes is coming from their own perspective and not the facts. It's my job to call the thing out. And so it's really important that in national security and intelligence and what we're seeing today, that people remember misreading a thread, misreading people, overlooking these patterns, like assuming that a behavior is based on a stereotype. One, that's operational risk. The people that are like actually doing the thing, let's say, you have to go pick someone up or whatever. It's an operational risk if you've already made assumptions about what you think this person or this community, how they are versus what you actually know. Like if there's no human intelligence, if there is no other types of intelligence that has told you anything differently, but you still feel that is the danger in this type of work. And it is, again, we have to think beyond the rumors if we are truly about humanity. And so the last thing I'll say is that is it very early in my career, I kind of alluded to this. I had to separate instinct from evidence and examine my own lenses and where I come from. And so when I transitioned also into big tech, the safety work, online harm, child safety, misinformation, I saw the same truth. And so bias shapes what we see, how we enforce the rules, and whose safety gets prioritized. So what we're seeing is this inflammatory rhetoric now that is causing harm to the very people that we would say in normal times that we are trying to protect.
I mean, it's a really timely thing to be talking about. With AI, being so much in the news. I mean, centered. I mean, it's been around for a really long time,
Yes.
but it's kind of taken a dominant position, not just in people's in the way. It's really what people are seeing or knowing now has been happening, and the difference is, I guess, that before you could probably make a plausible argument that by and large most people didn't think about. There being a dimension of AI involved. Like, give example, a Google search, right?
Yeah.
Is obviously informed by algorithms. But Google search has been around for a really long time, and they've been doing that and prioritizing, what they show and what they don't show. You were saying prioritizing who gets protected or who gets safety, or who has an entitlement to safety. And so, I mean, again, like, but now today, if I were to type something into ChatGPT, and it's able to do something like, bring up a whole bunch of information from a whole lot of different places, or maybe like even agentic, something that's even more directed and more focused. I think that I read an article about the one of the last big attacks, I guess, that Anthropic had been
Yeah.
discussing. Claude has been that there was somebody or a state actor that had been able to, or proxy, had been
Hmm.
able to use all these different agents basically to execute a larger malintended thing, which is absolutely, I mean, so far beyond anything that was in the public conversation 20 years ago. But
Right.
your conversation about people being aware of the dangers of rumors and misinformation, disinformation, or their own biases and what lenses they're looking at the world through. Um, it makes that even more complex.
I
And
agree.
so one thing that I really don't want to not talk about, because I feel like it's also part of this conversation, which is I think that on in your background I read a thing about how you were changed, your life was changed when you had a baby. And I'm going to tell you, I mean, while I didn't personally have a baby or anything,
Yeah.
as a dad, I'm a father, and
Yeah.
being a dad was something that totally changed. Becoming a dad was something that totally changed my life. Obviously, I think you hear that all the time from dads,
Right.
like, this is going to change everything. Or they say, like, I hope you enjoy your sleep right before the baby comes, or whatever. I mean, you hear all these horror stories about all,
Literally.
but the truth of the matter is, and what I try to remember when I'm talking to people who are either, um, are either pregnant or they're wanting to get
Hmm.
married and they're asking about, like, what to prepare for. And this is just on the sidebar here, because
Sure.
talking about being a dad, it makes me really proud. Um,
I can
is that
relate. It's a feeling.
is is that that is true, like the sleep deprivation and the all the hours and things that you spend kind of like going, oh my gosh,
Right.
when does the picking stuff up off the floor phase?
Before it ever
And
stop, right? Like,
yeah, I mean, or the rocks. When am I going to stop finding rocks in my pockets, right? Or in my jacket pockets or whatever. And
yes,
the truth of the
thrill.
matter is, like, it goes way faster than I would have ever wanted it to.
Same.
Even knowing what I know about the limited things I know about the sacrifices that a parent makes. And I say that because I wanted that to inform, like, the backdrop of this question. Do you see, like, partially the the what you were involved with, I guess, in the initial one, without, like, reading into it?
Sure.
Would you say that, like, the medical community had, and maybe I want you to be able to talk about this, like,
No, you're
the medical community in general has, like, had a bias has a bias as well, that can sometimes play to the detriment of these really vulnerable these really vulnerable lives, right? Technically, like, I think a decade ago or so, we had a law here in Texas that was being discussed, and it had to do with informed consent around a decision that that people have to make in a hospital, or you were talking
Mhm.
about maternal health care, and just your advocacy work. And I just wanted to ask about that. I think I would feel like I was not doing, like, it was a major thing that, like, I was thinking about. I was like, oh, she likes being a mom. Or she loves being a mom. I got to talk to her about parenting, because it's such a big part of this.
It really is. And like, thank you for one, bringing it into this space, because it also is a reminder that people, that we see and interact with, we're not a monolith. We are so many different, facets of ourselves every single day. And the one positive of today and like technology and like the evolution of people is that we are able to talk a bit more about the other things that you used to couldn't bring to work too much. Even if you were talking about parenthood, it had to generally be kind of a jokester kind of way of like, oh yeah, all the toys, or oh my gosh, my kid blew out his diaper today. But you could not talk about the really serious things. And now I think back on that, and because of my own lived experience of that, is also so isolating to really not be able to talk about what is impacting you. Because let's be clear, I do think, generally speaking, men do a better job of being able to compartmentalize work versus home. And I think women, just because of like physiologically, generally speaking, how we're set up, it's hard to like have this separation and not feel impacted by the thing, right? And so for me, thinking about my motherhood journey, it was very it was a lot. It was difficult. And as someone who honestly did not want kids, did not, I was like, I'm going to focus on my life. I'm going to be a philanthropist. I'm going to give back. And part of that is honestly informed by my own upbringing. I still had this trauma and fear. You want to talk about vulnerable communities? I still had this trauma around affordability, yet I was doing fine. Been blessed, and yet I wanted, if I had to be a parent, it wasn't going to be on a struggle. That was one, my mindset. And also, I knew the great responsibility that came with that. Well, God had another plan and surprise. So, having a very uneventful, pregnancy, and then to spend the last 17 weeks of my pregnancy expecting for my daughter to basically be born and pass away on the same day, that is a lot to grapple with. And remember, I was still in national security at the time. I had also been recently promoted at the beginning of the year into a leadership role. So again, being a type A visionary, type person, I had it all mapped out. I was going to take this amount of time off because at the time we did not have real maternity leave or parental leave. So it was either your regular PTO or sick leave. And so we call it in the government then the matrix of like, what time am I taking off? And and so again, I'm super planned out. I'm like, oh, okay, I'm excited. Even though I just told you don't want to be a parent, I'm like, oh my gosh, immediately learned I'm pregnant 4 weeks. And I'm like, oh my God, my whole life changed. And for me, not only being able to think about the world I was in, imagine being a professional and in a world that's very male dominant, very, very white, generally speaking. Being macho is important, and having to walk around and spend the last 17 weeks of your pregnancy, your belly is growing every single day. I'm dressed, ready to go, ready to work, heels on, makeup ready. I am ready to kill the day. Yet, having to walk around with that type of weight and only one or two other people in this entire 35,000 member organization understand what that was doing to me. So showing up at work with a smile, at home, literally cannot even keep it together. And to fast forward to how the intricacies of using my analytic expertise in saving my daughter's life and just the healthcare system in general is when people hear that I work in national security and intelligence or counterterrorism, all those things I talked about, they assume that that is a part of my life that is separate from my motherhood. And I never had the luxury to be. It's not. These are real analytic, like these muscles, the trade craft, this ability to see the patterns and question all this surface level explanation is really, to what you asked me, is why my daughter is alive. And also some divine intervention. I cannot leave that out. I've spent years truly assessing threats, evaluating credibility, managing complex information under pressure, having to learn to trust your instincts when the data may be telling you something different. Interrogating the data and pushing past all of the noise, as we talked about at the very beginning. And you learn how bias, explicit or implicit, can really distort your judgment, even among the most seasoned professionals and experts. And so when I became pregnant, when all the complications began, I didn't walk into these exam rooms as a passive patient. I had also learned that because my mom is a 2-time breast cancer survivor. So I was her advocate as well. And I walked in as someone who was trained. I was detected to understand weak signals, these inconsistencies and also the risks. And I'm so grateful that I did. And I just thank God every day for that. And the last piece of that is a lot of things just weren't adding up as well. And really, as a Black woman, I understood immediately what was happening. And some of it was implicit bias, as I kind of like when I look back on the situation at the time, I could not name it that. But I understand with my daughter's condition that it's it's super rare, less than 300 cases in the world, but it's highly concentrated in the Amish Dutch community. And what I was told when I had this initial diagnosis, and even once we got the confirmed diagnosis, was you should terminate, heal, and try again in that order. Just like that. No resources in front of me. Just, I need to get out of this hospital and I need to deal with that. And knowing where, like my daughter's condition, that information would have never been shared in that way with an Amish or Mennonite community mother. And it really took a lot of questioning. And I really leaned into that, my instincts and my expertise and also a lived experience to really come out of this thing not only changed, because I was very fragile and broken, not only changed, but transformed in a way that I could use my pain for purpose. And as a result of leaning into that and those things that make me who I am, the national security leader, the mother, the tech, safety leader, all these things really have helped to save other babies' lives.
Wow, that's first of all, that to hear that is heartbreaking. I mean, for so many reasons. But also, like, what do you think the bias, like, was it, you say it was like there was a community that would never have heard was it a suggestion that was made? What exactly
Like the
was
only
it?
option that was given. Like it was like, this is what it is. It's very matter of fact. And the reason why is that my daughter initially was misdiagnosed with another rare and lethal genetic disorder that looked very similar, to be clear, very similar to what she was ultimately diagnosed with. And there's, again, because it's lethal, about 99%, I know maybe 1 or 2% of babies that I know personally that have survived. And so it wasn't a suggestion. Again, it was coming from the best intentions. Because I'll never forget, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry. But there was no additional thought in like, where is the behavioral health person in this room? You're about to deliver some horrific, life-changing information. And what we know about trauma changes your DNA, right? And so the place that the high-risk doctor was coming from was really like my best professional opinion, right? And that was it, though.
It was like there was a professional opinion, but that was in some
Very
ways
finite.
lacking the like the personal.
Yeah.
I don't know what do you want to call it, the personal touch or the personal the parent, right? I mean, the part of you that has hope, right?
And the fact that you have a baby in you, like at this point, my baby had started kicking, so I have life that is growing, and like what? Like none of this is making any sense.
It's a total miracle. I mean, it's a total that's miraculous in and of itself. That's a miraculous thing that can happen. But I guess do you remember? Did you ever watch Lord of the Rings, or did you read any of the books, the J.R. Tolkien books?
Nope. My husband is that man. I'm like, nope, not as much over here.
Well, we happen to be going through that series right now, and it's kind of a fun time because this is my son's first time getting to go through all of that. Anyway, but we're getting to talk about a lot of really important topics. Not that we haven't ever talked about them before, but we get to talk about them and we'll communicate about them in a way that's, fairly lots of action, lots of depth of storyline, and lots of characters. And there's a scene, I think, in the second episode there or not episode. I'm listening to me. It's like I'm watching Star Wars. No, we're talking about Lord of the Rings here. We gotta draw the line of separation there. But this one is, I guess, where the Ints, the big trees that are talking, are able. This is such a funny thing to be able to say, but it's such a metaphor. And there's one of the hobbits is inside the tree, like being walked around, and they were like, he's trying to convince the Ent. The Ent is without hope. He's like
Yeah.
given up already. He's seen a lot, and it's almost like all the numbers, the numbers that the Ent is seeing, based on their experience and watching all the fellow trees being cut down, and people just don't care
Right.
about trees. They just There's
Hmm.
no reason to do it. There's no reason to try to believe that there's any good in the world. And then I mean, the Hobbit is sitting there in his ear saying, "Hey, I mean, you have a responsibility. You have an obligation. You have an obligation to this because." And he's like, "Why do I have an obligation?" He said, "You're part of this world. I mean,
Hmm.
you're part of all of this, and you have agency in what
Yes.
happens." And so, anyway, I wanted to bring that up because all of our conversation about bias and implicit bias, it's almost like when you give up on
Hmm.
trying to understand a problem set and as a whole, um, you risk you risk so much. Risk so much, right? I mean, I think that's the what I hear you saying is
Hmm.
that you were able to put that piece together, that human piece, and that already already
Yeah.
loved you already
Yes.
loved you
Dreams, all
you
these
had
things,
love.
right?
Yeah, you had
Yes.
love, and that was
Yes. Period.
that's inspiring. That's
No,
absolutely
thank
inspirational.
you.
That is a
Yeah.
transformative story.
It really is. And it had, and one thing I will say too, if it had not been for my husband, for those, who believe in a higher power, he's a dreamer. And I remember asking him clearly. I was just, now this was I did not know what to do. I'm like, this is what the medical people said. And I am a woman of faith, but I'm also a realist. I also believe in science. Right. And so I'm like, well, that's what they're saying. And like, I looked at all the things and like, this is what it is. And then it was the thing that doesn't have the data that also was moving me. And so because he had a dream that I was waddling, and keep in mind, you're 20, 22 weeks, you're your first kid, you're not, any of those things are happening. We knew that that was a sign we had carried our daughter to term. And because of that, I actually had made the appointment again, informed decisions, right? Because I had gotten a second opinion, all these things. And about 24 hours before the appointment, I still have the email to this day. I sent it, replied, canceled. And even when I look at it every now and then, it's still so chilling. And again, our life decisions are finite. And what I try to remind people, and even to your listeners, someone who maybe listen to this that may, live in a world of like having these very high and sensitive jobs, but you also have life that is happening around you, that do not allow religion to fool matters of the heart. You don't know what you will do until you're actually in it. And when it comes to like maternal, health, reproductive, none of it is black and white. It's so complicated. And it's really important to say that, because these things aren't happening in a vacuum, and there is a human piece to this in their emotions. I'm telling you, I don't know anyone who raises their hand to be like, I'm going to the clinic and I'm going to feel so good afterwards. Like, no. And it's really important that if we look at the person, look at the human and not the action, then we can see that person and have compassion for them. And two, it's not your business. It's one thing. And three, you also have to know, again, bringing all of my national security life and all those things back together, is that for me, thinking about the human piece, thinking about the analytic piece, and how much I went through, but yet there were experts looking at me that I didn't even know at the time, that thought I was handling all the navigation of the entire healthcare system so well, that literally I get calls on a regular some clinician, some doctor, hey, can you talk to this person? Some other, like, expert. Because I remind mothers, fathers, doesn't even matter. You're not powerless. You have the power. You know your child like no one else. And I always tell them it's important that we have to take our feelings out at times so that we can assess the data and the facts in front of us to ultimately get to what we want. And so I always start with when I'm talking to a parent that I've been, consulted, for whatever, is what is it that you want? Because a doctor, nurse practitioner, that's the language that they speak. And then we can go back to the feelings piece. And so that part, to be able to even do that, is some of it is informed training as an analyst, and also that human connection piece too. And so I don't, it transformed me, but I really am reminded every day when I see my beautiful miracle girl of why I do the work that I do and who I fight for and why I fight for it. And she really taught me that sometimes the most important intelligence mission that you'll ever have and that I will ever have doesn't happen in this war room. It happens in the hospital room as a mother refusing to allow bias and professional opinions write the ending to her story.
That is absolutely a wonderful, wonderful message, and I second that. And I want to tell you also that that like it's interesting to me that it's always refreshing to be able to talk to people who are clearly have a like a very deep respect for human life. And I don't, what do I mean by that? That's like a buzzword. I'm not trying to talk from a position of factions, but I really mean it the way I'm saying it, because I feel like there's a, and like I said, this is something that was a matter of debate, years ago, and around different conversation. It had nothing to do with this topic now, because it's something that's always in the news, and of course it's going to be framed because we're talking about it like this on YouTube, and the algorithm is going to say, hey, this should go out to this person because it's an echo chamber.
It is
that's exactly what we're talking about. Like, that's exactly the problem that we're talking about is being in that and not realizing that you're in it. But I guess it's also understandable from the perspective of a doctor or if their whole world is colored and really can't be, I guess their job really isn't to be hopeful either, because you can really hurt people.
And I had my second opinion maternal fetal medicine doctor also said that, and I was like, no, I appreciate your perspective. She's like, I don't want you all to continue on, and like, I have watched families literally ripped apart because they held on to so much hope. And this is, like, again, another woman of faith, a Christian woman like myself, and she was like, it is devastating where a lot of people don't recover from it. And I knew exactly what she was talking about because I know other families personally, and it just rocks your world. You're definitely not the same. I'm already not the same because of what I already endured. But that, it's great to have hope. But to your point about doctors, they do the level of being finite is also, and definitive is really important for them. And they have to live with the decision of, was it the right call or not? Because they're human as well.
And I think that playing specifically around we talk about Thomas Hobbes. I'm a big I'm a Hobbes nerd. I think that he is probably one of the best political philosophers. Especially to understand American government. Specifically, I feel like Hobbes is, and he's not just him. I don't mean it like that, but I'm just his perspective specifically on that the natural state of people is conflict. And if it's true, the natural state of people is war or conflict, and I make that assumption from the very beginning, I can immediately start trying to organize the world in a way that, and I guess if you're coming from the perspective of like a doctor, or in the same way maybe you would be if you were law enforcement,
Sure.
there are certain times that you can't have guesswork in there. And it's
Nope.
like, I can't really take a risk with this person, or
Right. Right.
this situation. I just can't.
Nope.
It's not really an option. There's too many variables at the table, and there's too many lives at stake, and there's too many interests that can be affected, and too much
Yeah.
money that can be impacted. There's a whole economy here. There's
Sure. No, it's a lot.
we're accustomed to a certain way of life.
Life. Yep.
There's instability that can be created.
Mhm.
There's, and there's, mistrust in community,
Yeah.
and mistrust in other things as well. I'm sorry. I'm just rattling off. It's just, it's
No. It's real.
I feel
What
like
do you
there's,
say? It's so much here, right? And I get it. It's like a lot of threads to be pulled on, and you're trying to get it into like one kind of pretty
right.
bow. I get
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. The insurance companies, another thing, such a big,
Don't get me
that's a big
started.
one. Oh my gosh.
Oh,
That's a big
I
one.
was having a whole rant about that earlier and last night. And because I live it, I am someone, and I won't go too far off tangent, but again, because all of it is interconnected, right? Because I was watching even the news last night, a woman spend time, public service, whole career, retire, insurance, all the things being then now insurance being impacted, and her husband, because someone declared him dead, and when he wasn't dead, it impacted the care that he could receive because there was no insurance. And it's the world that I live in, as having primary insurance, commercial insurance, but also because my daughter has complex medical needs, we were also able to qualify for Medicaid. And this is just a great reminder that, Medicaid has a very, stereotypical look to it. And it's not, because anyone could be the thing. And if you are a parent, short of you being a trillionaire or billionaire, it takes one medical bill before you likely could end up bankrupt. And I can tell you, as someone, when we received our first bill from the first part of the NICU, over just $500,000, no surgery, before the doctor's bills, the actual doctors, this was just for the hospital stay.
Wow, unreal. And I guess that ends up coloring so much your world when you're a doctor, and as well, like, it's not just like,
Yeah.
It's not as simple. There were, so about I think it was about 10 years ago, somewhere around there. Across the board, you remember when health insurance in general just went up, like,
Yeah.
it was just,
It's happening again.
American families, American families in America were just having to figure out either how they were going to have it or how they were going to live without it. And so I remember that our family went through that decision making process, and it was it was a big one, because
It's a big one.
you're talking about things that you take advantage, not take
For
advantage,
granted. Yeah, take for granted.
Yeah. The idea, and so trying to figure out what things cost, what they really cost.
Right.
If you don't have
Not
insurance,
the
it's part of that conversation, And
Yes.
we ended up having to not have insurance for about a year or so, or maybe a little bit longer maybe a little longer, maybe a couple of years.
Yikes.
And the reason it's brought up is because, it really opened my eyes, particularly having to go through the itemization of those bills. And seeing what exactly you're paying for, which tests are like necessary, it totally changes your brain. With you like start thinking like an insurance company, like,
Right.
what do I have to pay for versus
Right.
what is optional here? Like, we should be. And anyway, on one hand, you end up you learn that you can save money by by talking ahead of time with
Sure, sure.
itemized stuff, but then you realize also that there's all these other things that are kind of hidden in plain sight that are, I guess, also risks kind of associated with whatever's happening. And I'm just talking out of my hat. I'm sorry. I just
I,
wanted. I mean, I think that it's like it's right here in what we're talking about.
yeah, it
And I mean,
is.
yeah. So anyway,
It is. I to your point though, like I won't leave you out there because you're speaking to something that again, the vulnerable community. So we want to talk about this national security, intelligence, law enforcement, you know, immigration or not, and different people and how we live. Again, it's easy to come from the place of you should be doing this, you should get a job, you should be doing these things when you're coming from a place of privilege. But let's be clear, people who are on Medicaid or need Medicaid, most of them have jobs. They just don't pay enough. And their jobs just might not offer insurance too. And what I say to people um, is, it sound political, but it needs to be said because I think it's a juxtaposition. You cannot be pro-life if you're anti-social programs, period. And if we can get back to the human piece, forget the D, forget the R, if we can get back to the H, the humanity of it all, then there should be no one in the most wealthiest country in this world that has to fight for healthcare that we know is astronomical prices. And by the way, there is a cash price for the thing, and then there is the insurance price for the thing. And most people don't even know to ask that as well. And when it's one thing to be like, I don't have food, right? Because food is something that a community can easily rally around and get for you. Like, not saying the food bank has it all, but again, it's food is something that is within reach. If we just maybe have to reach out a bit more, but it can be there. Healthcare is a little bit more fuzzy. It's much more expensive, and you can't just be like, "Hey, can you help me out with this $2,000 MRI or CAT scan I just had?" It's like 5,000 now. But the point being, it's one thing to ask for food. It's another thing to ask, can you help me with my medical care? And easily one piece of that medical care is $5,000. Not possible. Again, I always tell our everyday people, we are all one health care catastrophe away from being bankrupt in this country. And when we lose the humanity, particularly the babies, the kids, they matter. Those kids don't get a say in how they come into this world, how and where they lived. And no one should be shamed for their circumstances. That's kid or adult, but darn sure a kid. It's already hard being a kid at certain points of your life. And then they're reminded all the time of what they don't have. And I think that also is a difference of my humble beginnings, is I wasn't reminded often of what I didn't have because my life was like rich with like community and people that we did not have a lot, but I never felt like we didn't have a lot because I had a good community around me. Even I remember, like, now I know there's this whole tension with like law enforcement and the people. And I can tell you, growing up in public housing, I remember when the police officers walked the beat, they would be out with the kids. And like, we had a great relationship. I was not afraid of law enforcement, just not. And they also understood the communities that they operated in because they walked. And when they saw, and I have a family that part of my family of law enforcement as well. And so to see and for some areas, it's always been what you see, but for some areas, it has not always been that way. And again, I think when you get away from the human touch and you're trying to police a community from a car, you're going to have a natural fear. But if you are policing from the person in front of you, the everyday person, the kid that their kid, the dad may be selling drugs or whatever, but the kid is a good kid. Not to say the dad is not a good person. They're just doing this bad thing. Like it cannot all be the same. And what I find in vulnerable communities is that it's very hard for us to get the second chance, the third chance, the fourth chance. We're immediately shunned into whatever that bad thing was. And very rarely do we get the grace to recover because we've done the thing, we've done our time, or whatever that thing is, to be then reintegrated into society. If that also included, jail time or whatever, or even just something at work you did and it was something bad, but it wasn't. I went to jail, but it's shame. We don't generally get to recover from that because biases and stereotypes have already informed what our end state and our destiny is supposed to be. And I think that that is something that this country really has to reckon with. Also, when we think about national security and how we think about, violent organizations, even from, international terrorism and ideology, like the fact that, and I'll stop at this, the fact that we no longer have a USAID is a problem. And in very much layman's terms, the reason why we have a problem, the rest of the world, and particularly I would say the Americans, we get to like operate and do our day to day and just go on about life, right? What people don't understand is whether we are Americans, America, the government is either coming in to help a country, to destabilize it willingly or unwillingly, all those things. We have a responsibility to provide at bare minimum the food, nutrition for these regions because it's a soft power, right? One. And then two, we also at times can be complicit. And I'm not some like crazy radical person. I'm simply stating the facts. And USAID was the place, the organization that really brought all of this together, and in many ways was a barrier and a protection for everyday American citizens because USAID, of course, is operating around the globe. And to not have USAID as an entity in this current season really is a vulnerability to our national security because now you have told a mother, I'm just give this very simple example. You have told a mother that your baby will starve. You no longer have resources. Let's say you're in a camp, refugee camp or whatever. We are no longer going to give you resources and your baby's going to starve. I'm going to tell you this as a mother, the things we talked about, Aaron, as well. A mother will go to no end to ensure that her babies have food. And if that means that she is now operating in nefarious activity, not because she wants to, in her mind, she has to. That spirit of desperation becomes real. So when we want to talk about vulnerable communities and this facade of like pick yourself up by the bootstraps and why did you do this horrible thing when you left these people no choice? And in many ways, this migration of people to these countries, we have to take a look at our own selves as a country and realize what did we do to now have people wanting to come here because they can no longer live in the places they lived. But Americans don't do enough research. As I've been saying, lady, make America research again, make America read again, because we are missing these nuances to very complicated issues, and the legacy media is framing them in black and white terms when it's not that simple, and people are getting their facts from social media when social media companies have told you they're not the arbiters of truth, meaning they ain't fact checking people. That is not their job, is what they're saying, which I think is irresponsible. But TikTok is not your source of truth. And I just want to just kind of drill that down for anyone that's listening at the end of this and thinking about all the things that are happening in our country, around the globe, to really think about what makes a community vulnerable and why, and what leads them to some of the decisions that you may see as the last action item.
Yeah, for sure. That's there's a lot of wisdom in that. I think feel like is just informed by just life experience, especially around the you know, not immediately assuming that that there's like malicious thing people are trying to do malicious things. Specifically, I could probably talk about
Sure.
the what's particularly around our current world, the fentanyl crisis is a
Yes.
good example of it. It's like there are so many different dimensions to the I guess like the what is it, the
Yes, the supply
supply chain of
chain.
that. And really, if you're if you're a member of a community and you know in a really small town with very
Sure.
few roads in and around
Hello.
and you just don't have a lot of you don't have as many choices or
No.
resources, I should say. It doesn't mean that, but it still doesn't mean that people know they don't know what right or wrong is. That's not
Yeah.
necessarily
Yeah.
true, but
Right. Right.
but at the same time, I mean, if if people have grown up in a situation where you know their grandfather's grandfather and every
Mm.
person since certain has been participating in this in an illicit economy, right?
Absolutely.
Um,
There you go. Yep.
then
Yep.
maybe it's not as hard to find that as a reasonable opportunity, right? And that is something. I mean, I think specifically, and you know,
Sure.
being from where I'm
Sure.
from is something that I take for granted. It's like that's a major thing. I mean, and I mean, I also like around the. I mean, framing it as a more complex problem today.
Sure. 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 Sure.
Um, our AI, the AI problem is, and I guess the synthetic bio problem. It's like the
Oh my
fentanyl issue
God.
kind of plays
Yeah.
into all this stuff that
Yeah.
I mean, I think the DEA has their own website now where people can
Yep.
submit
Hmm.
fentanyl analogs and all these other things that
Yes.
plaguing. I mean, like just because there's so many possibilities for synthetic
And
material,
it's deadly, right?
and
Like
it's
that. It
so
makes.
deadly. Yeah,
Whoa.
yeah,
I'm with you.
and in addition to that, like how do you? I mean, it's not a problem that
Mm.
it's not an easily solvable problem because we have so many different individual needs that have to be met
Absolutely.
and just limited resources and
Yep.
competition is everywhere and it's fierce and it's not
I
going
don't
away.
disagree.
If anything, I feel like it's getting worse.
Yeah.
I'm getting more aggressive.
Yeah.
And I mean, I could probably talk to you about this to forever, so I won't. And you know
Fair
what?
enough.
And you
That's
know
so
what?
funny.
We've been
I
talking for about an hour and feels like an hour and a
hour and
half,
a half. Oh
I
my God.
think.
I just looked up too.
Yes. Yeah, but
Wow.
I absolutely
Oh,
am so glad that we got to have you today. And
yes, me
I see.
too.
Yeah, and we'll have to have you back sometime.
Please, I'm happy to come back. I enjoy having very thought-provoking conversations, and I would just say to your audience, I also don't have a problem with being wrong. I don't have a problem with you disagreeing with the things I and how I see things, right? But I also, where I draw the line is like, if it's facts, right? And we can have a differences of opinion, but we cannot have a differences on facts. And I love having this conversation that was so fluid yet so intentional and across a gamut of things. To me, it felt very like communal, very human centered. And I think that that is so important. If we talked a bit more about the human piece of just any issue, I think we could find the solutions a lot easier than how we make them so complicated.
Hmm. Yeah, that's going to be something we can maybe talk some more about in the future.
Yeah,
And I know Beth will probably want to join in, and
absolutely.
especially she'll have something to say about it. So anyway, I had so much fun. It
Thank
was an
you.
honor. It was an honor getting to meet you and getting to talk to you. And thank you so much.
Right here. Thank you. Have a good one.
Yes, ma'am.